Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks so much for clicking. It means a lot that you guys keep clicking. If you guys keep clicking, I'll keep making. And today's video is going to be on all 42 runner-ups and how I think they did on the show. I'm going to rank them 42 through 1. 42 being the worst and 1 being the best runner-up. To be clear, these are only people that got second place. And yes, for the times when there was a tie for second place, meaning the unanimous winners, I will be counting both people. So in total, there are technically 45 runner-ups in the history of the show as of filming this video. And so to me, I'm going to rank those 45 off of their games, and this is specifically the game that they played in these seasons, not overall. So someone like Rob, who placed second in All-Stars, I'm going to rank his All-Stars game, not his overall Survivor career or him as a player or his potential for the future. As always, like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff because it's free, it's easy, and it really helps the channel out. And if that's it, let's get right into the video. And also, before we start, it's actually 47 runner-ups. Correction, 47 runner-ups. So at number 47, I have Shepard. To me, Philip has nothing good about his game. The only thing you can really make the argument for is that he was part of the majority alliance and was able to stay on the inside of the onion, but the only reason he did is because of how bad he played the game and how much he was never going to win the game. I don't give him credit for getting Ralph's vote, as Ralph's vote was more of a throwaway based off of their similar ridiculous personalities. I think Philip actively plays one of, if not the worst social game that we've ever seen make it to the end of the game. And honestly, if we were ranking third and second place finishers, he might actually still be last on this list. At number 46, I have Will Sims, again a player who really didn't do anything the entire game. In fact, I even considered putting him below Philip because at least Philip got in the majority alliance. Will played from the bottom the whole game, and basically from final 8, nobody felt the need to take him out because he was that bad at the game. Played a horrible social game, picked fights with Shireen and also the other no-collar people. He had a good relationship with Joe and a decent one with Rodney. Again, 2 people who were never really getting to the end. I think overall his game is really lackluster at best. At 45, I have Cassandra from Survivor Fiji. Again, another one really where to me, she just does nothing. She has no game. She doesn't make any moves. I will say though, she has that number 1 bond that neither Philip nor Will really have. I mean, you could argue Philip with Boston Rob, but that was more of a GOAT bond. Whereas in Cassandra and Dreams were legitimately number 1s. And I think Dreams would have taken Cassandra to the end with him, and I think Cassandra may actually beat Dreams at the end, which is saying something because Dreams is a pretty hefty player as far as strategy. He does make some strategy decisions in that game, so I think her social game does speak for itself, but her strategy is non-existent, her physical is non-existent, and overall I think her respect from the jury is also non-existent. At number 44, I have Katie from Palau. I think Katie, again, someone who was never winning the game, and if you're noticing the pattern so far, this like bottom part of my ranking is people who are never going to win, never had a chance to win, and still actively went with people who were going to beat them. Cassandra with Earl, Philip with Boston Rob, Will with Mike, you know, these like, and also Rodney for that matter. And now Katie, someone who was going to go to the end with Tom and Ian and Jen. And I think honestly, Jen, Tom, and Ian, and also Greg as well, all beat her at the end. So her entire alliance of 5 within her tribe was always going to be her. On top of that, their physical dominance had nothing to do with her, so you can't really credit her with that. I think her game is also bad. I do think the fact that she is within the core of her alliance and also isn't as big of a GOAT as the rest of these players like Will, like Cassandra, like Philip, does put her above them. At number 43, I have Kelly Wigglesworth. I know that she may seem a little bit low, but really, like, think of what she does. Her best move is winning 4 immunities at the end, and the immunities that she won weren't even challenges that were impressive or showed her skill. It was, you know, season 1 immunity challenges in which it's not like she like knew that and went out there and prepared for it. Obviously, you can't really knock her for that, but I think the challenges themselves aren't really impressive. So then it comes down to her game, and she alienates herself from her own alliance, picking fights with Sue, causing Sue to be that deciding vote against her, and also give that speech at Final Tribal. She goes to the end with Rich, which honestly was the better option over Rudy, and that's honestly a big thing why she is as high as she is here and not lower, is because she makes the optimal choice of bringing Rich to the end over Rudy, because Rudy was always going to beat her. I will say though, I think she was never winning against either of them. Probably also loses against Sue, although it's iffy there. But again, I think she ruins her relationships with Sue, and that was really her way to get to the end with Sue, was to be friends with her, and then she picks a fight with Sue. It's just it really doesn't make any sense to me, and it shows her lack of strategy in this game. At number 42, I have Dreams. Someone again, Dreams is very similar to Cassandra, where he does little to nothing socially. I will say though, his strategy is better than Cassandra's by far. He does make moves. They're not necessarily good ones, but at least it's something. I would take bad moves over no moves. Well, I guess I wouldn't, but in this case, his moves weren't so horrendous, and they did get him to the end. And I will say though, him betraying Yao, although it was done in a bad way, was necessary. And if he had brought Yao to the end or given up his necklace, he would have gone home or gone to the end with Earl and Yao, two things that would have resulted in guaranteed losses for him. So I think overall he does make a good decision there. And you'll notice that as we get deeper into this list, the people are still goats, but now they're starting to be goats that do have some sort of strategy to them and have awareness of where they are in the game and tried to get out of that role. And I think you can kind of start that tier with Wigglesworth and now with Dreams, two goats who tried to make their games better and goated to the end with other goats like Rich, like Cassandra, but in the end failed because they could not figure out how to beat the person that they took to the end. At number 41, I have Tasha, again, a goat who to me had some sort of awareness as to where she was in the game. Now, she didn't have that awareness with Jeremy, but I will say she did try and go for Spencer at 4 if the whole Kelly vote didn't work out there, where they almost blindsided Spencer, but it really wouldn't have mattered because she was very loyal to Jeremy, was willing to go to the end with him the whole time, and was going to get beat by him 10-0. So that's really knock on her game by far. Number 40, I have Sherry. Again, a goat who to me, really, it's different with Sherry. She plays a great game pre-merge, dominates her tribe, forms good bonds, is able to keep her tribe from completely falling apart and like turning into like a oolong situation. I think the issue is as soon as she gets to the merge, she finds herself in a tough spot and just gives up. She completely gives up, doesn't really try that hard, gets to the end, has one of the worst final tribal performances. It's just bad. It's really bad look for Sherry, and I think really it's the second half of her game that does her in here and puts her down at the bottom of this list. At number 39, I have Kim Johnson. Again, in Africa, I think she really never had a shot to win the game. Obviously, her edit was definitely no shot, but I think in general, her as a player, she had little to no respect from the jury. I think the jury was never going to vote for her, even over like a Big Tom, like a goofy guy. Definitely not over Lex or Ethan. Maybe she can beat like a T-Bird. Even then, though, I think T-Bird probably beats her. I think she's beat by the entire merge tribe. Maybe not Clarence, but besides that, everybody else who made the jury, she has a good chance to get beat by most of them. Maybe Kelly doesn't beat her. Maybe Brandon doesn't beat her. Maybe Frank doesn't. But I think a lot of people have a good shot against her, and almost everyone has at least a fighting chance against her at the end. And that's a big knock against her game. At number 38, I have Dawn from Kate Caramon. Again, someone who, just like the past few people, goes to the end with someone who is going to beat them, not just by a little bit, but thoroughly. It's not even close. I mean, she got demolished by Cochran. She doesn't do anything to stop it. And on top of that, she knows that Cochran is a jury threat and she doesn't have the heart to take him out. That, to me, is not impressive at all and warrants a low spot on this list. At 37, Ken from Millennials vs. Gen X, another one, going to the end with David, who he tries to go to the end with the whole time, and he can't even do that correctly. But even if he got his way there, he loses the game severely. And again, just like how he got 0 votes in this final tribal, he's also probably going to get 0 votes if he goes to the end with David. In fact, it's probably even more severe. So again, it's just like, if your whole goal in the game is to lose the game, because I mean, going to the end with David, if that's your goal is to lose the game. If that's the case, it's just so hard to respect you as a player because your judgment is just so off. At 36, we have Lil from Survivor Pro Islands. And again, this is a goat to me that's different. She doesn't really have a plan to go to the end with anybody. She kind of stumbles her way through the game, which I actually take over someone who plans their whole game out, but they plan it incorrectly. I'd rather somebody just stumble their way through the game in like a Sugar-esque way, where at least they just stumbled their way through, but made some good decisions, some good blindsides, some good moves. Maybe it was maybe more emotionally charged, but at least they didn't like strategically plan out their whole game and then it's wrong and it's not right and it leads them to, you know, go to the end with someone who beats them. At least Lil kind of just stumbled her way to the end in a strategically meh way. At 35, I have Nalia, and to me, the big thing with Nalia is that she doesn't start playing the game until, day 27, she admits to the jury at Final Tribal. I think that's a big knock on her game, no matter how hard you play. For example, someone like Chris Underwood, who really only played the game for like maybe 10 or 15 days total. You know, he's obviously knocked on most rankings, and I think you do have to knock Nalia for really only playing the game for about a third of it strategically. But she does play the game socially and physically pretty well for the time that she's in the game, so I do have to give her credit there. At 34, I have Clay. At 33, I have Wu, someone to me who is extremely strategically lacking. He doesn't have that sense of how to play the game, and when a move is optimal for him, I really don't think that he could find that move, which is a big thing. I will say though, he's very likable. He had a very good jury management, and I think he beats most people in that post merge, other than maybe like an LJ and a Spencer and a Tony, obviously, because that's who he loses to. So I think he does have more opportunities to beat people. I think he beats Trish. I think he beats Sarah. I think he beats Jeffra. I think he beats the girl with the huge knockers that I can't think of her name right now. I think he beats Cass for sure. You know, there's so many people who I think he could be at the end, and I don't really think that he necessarily planned on going to the end with Tony. It just kind of happened that way. So I also don't want to knock him there. Like he didn't plan out his game incorrectly. It just kind of ended up the wrong way for sure. Although his choice at the end to bring Tony was a big mistake. At 32, I have Matt from Survivor Amazon, another one to me who kind of stumbled his way through the game. Although it is impressive that he didn't plan on going to the end with the people that beat him or that were going to beat him, in like Jenna or like Rob, Sesternino. He didn't plan on going to the end with them. It just kind of happened that way. And he does make some moves, and he does end up throwing the Final 3 Immunity Challenge, which is the right choice in that spot, as you don't want to have to choose between Jenna or Rob and lose the other one's vote. At least he kept his options open there. I think the issue is like everything pre going with Rob at 7. I think it's just really horrible gameplay by him. During the pre-merge, he was almost the boot after Ryan and Daniel went home. I think on top of that, post-swap, he didn't really blend in with his tribe that well and was looked at as crazy during the merge. I think on top of that early merge, he was being absolutely played by Rob. I think at 7 is really where his game kicks in. He finds a way to flip back and forth with Rob, and eventually he's able to take out Rob at 3. Very impressive stuff. And the main issue comes with his first like 25 days of gameplay. At number 31, I have Hannah Shapiro, someone who I think is a little overrated. I think her game is very messy. She's not very good strategically. I think she's not very good at dictating things, taking control, and I think overall that she needs to have more of an assertiveness to be a better player. I think Adam plays a better game than she does. I know some people think that she deserved to win over Adam, but I think her social game is just trumped by Adam's social game and Adam's personal growth arc during this season. She's more neurotic, and I think her social gameplay is decent. Her physical play is better than expected, but her strategy is just like not necessarily there. At number 30, I have Sabrina, someone who, again, like when your plan is to go to the end with arguably the best player of all time in a newbie season, like you lost, like it's over for you. Like that immediately puts you behind 30 in this ranking, and I think for me that's what brings her down. Sabrina's a good player. She makes good moves this season, good blindsides, manages her 2 tribes very well, is in several alliances. It's just that her plan is to go to the end with Kim frickin' Spradlin. Like really, like it's done. It's over. You lost. It's done. I'm sorry. Number 29 is Danielle from Survivor Panama. Danielle's interesting. Her social gameplay is awful. People just don't like Danielle. They find her to be nasty. They find her to be kind of like a quitter, almost like not a very competitive beast on a season with competitive guys like Terry, like Shane, like Aris. I think in general, her archetype did not fit this jury, and she did not play up to the right things. She tried to play up to her backstabbing and strategy, which would have worked nowadays, but with this season just really did not work. On top of that, her own alliance really didn't like her. She's probably the least socially ingrained within her alliance, other than maybe Courtney, who even then, at least Courtney had Shane. Danielle's biggest alliance was Aris, who I guess was okay, but not necessarily the most solid ally in the world. At number 28, I have Susie from Survivor Gabon, someone who to me really doesn't play the game. I really don't know how in the world Susie almost wins this season, but it really is the fact that she was one Randy vote away from winning the season. I mean, she was this close. That Randy vote was pretty close to flipping, and if she had just done like one thing right or said like a different thing, I think she honestly probably does get his vote. On top of that, the whole cookie situation was kind of calling it close. On top of that, at Final Tribal, she gives a bad answer and probably ends up losing his vote. I think overall, to me, she's so close to winning that you have to give her credit, but she does nothing. She plays actively bad the whole game and actively not at all part of the game. So I think for me, I can't really respect her game too much. At number 27, I have Natalie Anderson from Winners at War. Someone who, again, she plays a cool game while she's in at the end, but she's literally the first boot one. So she's in the game for what, 3 days plus the 6 days at the end. She's not even in the game for 10 days, which to me is a huge knock on her game. She really doesn't play a full game, and she relies on advantages that she got from the edge. Again, just not a real game of Survivor. It is an impressive game while she's in, but it's just not a real game of Survivor, so it's hard to put her any higher than this spot. And even I think this is kind of a push. I feel like I could have put her a lot lower, but I think her game while she's in is pretty impressive. Not as impressive as like Chris Underwood's was, but definitely impressive. At number 26, I have Baylor, someone who was kind of second in command to her boyfriend John. I think to me, the overall biggest problem with Baylor is the fact that her strategical awareness and when to make the moves was dictated based off of when John wanted to make the moves. Anytime that she wanted to go against John, it was probably a bad decision, and John's logic just made more sense. I think a lot of her game is carried by her boyfriend. I will say her social bonds are good, still not as good as her boyfriend's. Again, there's kind of a common theme here. She really is just not as good as her boyfriend, who to me plays her game for her, for the most part. Okay, guys, so apologies, by the way, if my voice changed or if my volume changed. I'm kind of recording on a second day here. I just woke up. So the person that I have at 25 is Twyla. I think Twyla, to me, is a player who plays a fantastic game post-merge. Her pre-merge game socially is pretty lackluster. And on top of that, I think that overall, her chances of winning were very low against most of the cast, other than maybe Eliza can pull out a win against her. I think she does not win against many people, but her game itself, her strategy is super impressive. At 24, I have Courtney from China. And I think to me, the big thing with Courtney is that, yes, she is technically a GOAT, right? Like, she's definitely not like a formidable opponent who's had really a good shot to win. And on top of that, she never really made a move on her own. That's really the big knock against her. But the positives are that she's in control the entire game. Like, every big move, she votes with the majority and knows that it's happening and is never really in trouble the entire game, despite the fact that she's like 3 pounds and should have been voted out like day one, being an easy pre-merge boot. And so it's very interesting. On top of that, she was able to get 2 votes against Todd and Amanda, 2 of the better players ever, like in the history of Survivor. So I feel like it's worth giving her credit there. The issue comes where, like, how do you put her any higher than like 24, like the 25 area, with her being basically a GOAT? So for me, this is really the last like blatant GOAT on the list, I think. At 23, I have Monica, and she's also very similar to Courtney, except for the fact that she didn't get any votes. So maybe she should be lower. Thinking about it now, I will say the argument for her is that I don't see Monica as a GOAT. I think Monica did have a shot, and Monica's Final Tribal performance was one of the best that I've ever seen by a losing finalist. She gives an emotional, like really good speech capturing like the social isolation that she faced and why she wasn't very socially connected, you know, being very isolated, feeling like nobody wanted to get to know her. And so I feel like that was very impressive. On top of that, she made every move with Tyson and Jervis, was within the Onion Alliance of her big alliance. Again, it's just very, very impressive. On top of that, her husband was Brad Culpepper, so you'd think that would kind of tank her game after his shenanigans, let's just put it that way, but it really didn't, and she recovered quite nicely. She was in control pre-merge, post-merge, and in the last few rounds of the game, and so I feel like it is definitely admirable. The issue is she doesn't get any votes, and that kind of makes her a GOAT in a way, but I don't think she's really a GOAT, to be honest. At 22, I have Fishback, and this one's hard because on one hand, Fishback's individual game, just his moves and how he plays the game before the jury comes into play, is fantastic. He makes his own moves. He really directs his own alliance. He has his own Onion Alliance. He has several options. He has the Exile Alliance. He has all these choices, all these paths, all these moves. Very impressive. Blindsides, this, that. But in the end, the person who he wanted to go to the end with was going to always beat him 7-0 at the end. And that's a gigantic issue because it really negates everything from me. The fact that his plan was to go to the end with frickin' JT, like arguably one of the best social players ever, for a game, was JT's game in Tokensheens. He played the game fantastically socially, and Steven just either didn't see that or didn't really care or just didn't want to win. I don't know, but it's just such a mistake to bring JT to the end and actively try and do that the entire game when he had chances to flip on JT earlier in the game. He did realize it at 3, but by that time it was too late, and because JT was always going to win that immunity challenge. So to me, I think it's a very interesting, but also just he took JT to the end. Oh, it's bad. But I will say his individual game is one of the best that we've seen on the list so far, and will be the best probably until like the final 15, 10, something like that. Dean's game for me is the case of, hey, he has moves on his resume, and that's better than most of the people under him. Again, a lot of these final juror rankings are really people who just had nothing. They got dragged to the end, or they simply just went to the end with someone who they knew would beat them, or that they didn't know, but they still actively tried to go to the end with them. I will say that that's not the case with Dean, and that's why to me he's higher. I do think it's kind of a reach to put him this high, like especially over people like Fishback and people like that, but it really is for me the fact that he doesn't have a plan to go to the end with Tommy. Whereas if, for an example, Lauren beats Dean in the fire making challenge and then gets to the end with Tommy and gets second place, and she's a runner-up, she's much lower on this list for me because of the fact that she actively tried to get to the end with someone who would beat her. And so to me, that's a big deal. And Dean didn't do that. And so that's why he's this high. At number 20, I have Lisa, someone who I think had a good shot to win socially, strategically, and I think in the end just went to the end with the wrong person, with the wrong story. And it wasn't even her plan, which is good. I will say the knock on her is that her and Scoopin collectively decided to go to the end with Malcolm and Denise, two people who are going to beat them. That's the only knock that I can find. Her pre-merge game is pretty decent considering her age difference on her tribe. On top of that, I think that her bond with Jonathan Penner was very, very good for her game. She made a lot of social relationships. Everyone likes her. I think in the end, she probably beats Scoopin, which is pretty impressive. I think overall, she plays a great game. She plays like a winner's game almost. It's just that instead of going to the end with like Penner and Carter, they go to the end with Malcolm and Denise, and that's just a serious issue because both of them beat her and Scoopin. At number 19, I have Mike White from David vs. Goliath, and I think Mike White's game is pretty interesting. Again, similar to Lisa, he plays a lot of game the entire time. He's very active. He does make some moves. On top of that, I think he is willing to do blindsides, unlike Lisa. He's more strategically good at the game. I think on top of that, he is making several alliances. He has passed to the end. And on top of that, he didn't plan on going to the end with Nick. Nick won out, which to me is a positive because he didn't plan on going to the end with someone who would beat him. I think the big problem for me is the fact that he just lacks that oomph in his game. I feel like he lacks the ability to really close out his game, even if he was at the end against like Kara and Angelina. I think still they would probably be Kara winning that one, or Kiara, or however the hell you say her name. I feel like to me, Mike just lacked the ability to close at the end. He doesn't really have like that final tribal winner voice, I guess, and to me, that's a big knock on his game. Next up, I have Mike Turner from Survivor 42, who to me played a great game and was just against the wrong person at the wrong time in Survivor. First of all, we obviously know that in this new era, the juries are favoring people of color and women to win the game, which is something that Mike could have never known because he hadn't seen 41. And so I really can't knock Mike for trying to go to the end with someone like Marianne, although that really wasn't his plan. I feel like in the end, I can't knock him for that. As far as his moves, he makes tons of moves, and really he makes moves when it matters, right? He doesn't make any big moves really until the high blind side, which is all his, completely all his. He's big in on the Drea and Omar blindsides. I couldn't call those his necessarily, but they're definitely close to being his, especially the Drea one. The Omar one, I guess you can kind of give to Marianne, but the Drea one is really him versus Drea. High is him versus high. He really does make these gigantic moves, which alter the entire season's course. And I think for that reason, he's a very, very good runner-up. At number 17, I have Ozzie from Cook Islands. For me, it's tough because Ozzie was this close to winning and really was just a small deal that Yule made away from winning. The issue for me is I don't respect Ozzie's game at all. But it's just the fact that the jury respected Ozzie's game. And again, that is the most important thing when it comes to winning. I do have to give him credit there. But personally, if I was ranking games, of course, I'm big on strategy and also social gameplay and also who you want to go to the end with. Those are big things, and I think all of those are really bad on Ozzie. He plays no strategy for the most part, other than on his original tribe, where he does impressively throw a challenge successfully without like it backfiring in his face. His social gameplay is meh, and he wants to go to the end with Yule, arguably one of the better players from the first 13 seasons of the show. So it's not good. It's really not good. All right, this is the third day that I'm recording this video. I'm putting in tons of work for you guys. At 16, I have Spencer from Cambodia, where on like one hand, he plays a pretty good game, but as soon as he decides to go to the end with Jeremy, it's done. I'm sorry, like he can't be any higher than he is right now, and I think it's even a reach to put him this high up on the list. I think overall, Spencer's big mistake is obviously realizing that Jeremy was going to beat him too late. I mean, he says it during the finale that on the way out of Final Tribal, he knew that Jeremy was getting every single vote, and it's just too late. He should have realized that at 7 or 8 and took him out. I will say though, he plays a great game, and pre-merge he's able to get out of a bad spot, similar to Kagiyan, and get into a big alliance post-merge. And also during the swap, I believe he's the one who executes a 3-2-1 vote very successfully. So I feel like to me, it shows his strategic ability in the game. I just think overall, the second that he went with Jeremy was the second that he was going to be at the very highest 16 on this list. At number 15, I have Stephanie, someone who's in a similar boat as Spencer, where she goes to the end with Rafe, someone who is always going to beat her because they're just more likable in general. Although I will say she makes all of the moves in the game. Like every single move in the game, she was at least a part of, if not completely in control of it, which is super duper impressive. I see personally her game as one of the best up until that point. She plays a dominant game, taking out her own allies as well as the minority alliance. And the only mistake that she makes is not taking out Danny at Final Four. So to me, the big thing for me is just the fact that she is so strategically in control of the game. Obviously, the bad thing has to be the fact that she obviously takes Rafe to the end and lets it get to the point where it is between her and Rafe for who Danny is choosing to bring to the end. And at that point, it's already too late. Even if Stephanie wins that immunity challenge, she probably still doesn't get to win because Danny and Rafe both beat her there. So I think she got in a point where two people were both going to beat her at the end in her Final 3 scenario, and that's an issue. At number 14, I have Deshawn, and I think for me, Deshawn is such a complicated person because he ended up being a GOAT towards the end because nobody respected him as a person or a player, but his game is just so dominant. And it's not just dominant in one part, it's dominant both from start to finish and also social and strategy. It's so dominant. His original tribe is completely controlled by him and Danny, but he is the one who really has the control. He has enough social know-how and power to feel comfortable throwing a challenge to get Erica out, of which was quelled by their own teammate just being a beast in the seer. It wasn't them failing at it. Then on top of that, at the merge, he gets hit with a bad twist that takes out his easy boot in Erica, and instead he's able to successfully split votes on the Yase members, although it may have seemed like a Yase win was really more of a win for Deshawn because he didn't end up having some weird vote split come back on him. And then on top of that, he was then able to take out a lot of easy targets like Tiffany, like for an example, Evie. And I think after that, it really was just easy pickings until the big Shan boot where he blindsides his own ally member, and then after that he really does get in the spot where he's on the bottom, but he plays from the bottom very well, is able to beat Heather and Fire. It's just dominance. It's absolute dominance, and I think that does need to be credited. The issue is obviously he was never winning the game. He did not have the jury's respect, and in the end that is a very important thing. Brad Culpepper is another one, although I think he had more of a shot to win and more actively kind of lost the game towards the end, being mean to people like Ty and Aubrey. I feel like overall he plays a very similar game where he's basically in control his whole game. In fact, he actually takes control at that weird Malcolm boot tribal during the pre-merge. He's able to take control of the game, form his alliance, get the numbers at the merge, and just boom, 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 his target's out. And all of the flipping that Sarah does, he's able to manage it by not getting blindsided himself, makes a good alliance with Sarah. And in the end, the jury just happened to swing 2 votes over to Sarah. I think he had a shot to win more than Deshawn did for sure. At number 12, I have Mama C. I think Mama C is a good player, especially for her age. I feel like she really did take control of her tribe. She was in a good spot post swap. At the start of the merge, she was a little bit but she was still able to kind of crack into that power blue collar alliance. And when she finally was on the chopping block at I believe it's final 6 is when she plays her idol and idles out Dan Foley, a big target, which honestly was probably her spot. I mean, if Dan doesn't go out there, it's probably a Will, Dan, and Mike final tribal. So that was big for her, basically earning her own spot at the end with a big idol play. At number 11, I have Gavin. I think a big part of the reason why Gavin's so high, he plays a great game. He blindsides Aubrey in the pre-merge with his allies. He has several people who kind of go out and who are shielding him while he's making the decisions. He has the most respect out of anyone in his alliance. The only issue is obviously Chris comes back in the game at the right time with the right advantages and knows the right people and has the right connections. And of course, the entire jury was always going to vote for Chris because they all suffered with him. So it's tough. I think overall, though, that Chris is someone who probably should not have won the season because he got voted out. And so I think Gavin should probably deserve to win the season, therefore making him obviously have to be very high on this list. I mean, if he deserved to win the season completely because the other person got literally voted out of the game, I think you have to put them pretty high up on the list. At number 10, I have Amanda from Micronesia. Again, this is specifically her Micronesia game where she's really the second in command to Parvati, although she makes the moves along Parvati. Now, obviously, the big thing is she wants to go to the end with Parvati, someone who's going to beat her. But then again, everybody beats Amanda because Amanda falls apart at the end. I think mainly where her game shines is when she's able to get these guys to kind of get close to her, like Eric, like Ozzie, and then kind of use that connection to backstab them very quickly. It's very impressive, and her and Parvati kind of run this game together. Although I will say Parvati is basically the person who's in control for the most part. Number 9, I have Colby, and this is really just purely because Colby should have won this season, not because I would have voted for Colby at the end. I'm saying, like, if Colby just put an ounce of effort into actually trying to make a final tribal plea, I think he wins the season easily. People who voted for Tina have said in post-game in interviews that they just didn't think Colby wanted to win. And I think in the end, Colby was a character who was super likable by this jury. This jury really respected his game, and I think he really did lose the game towards the end. They're just not really trying. He seemed to be very lethargic and not really putting his effort in. He more was concerned with looking good on TV, which maybe was a better investment because he got all those endorsements and ads and commercials and stuff and movies. But I think in the end, as far as game goes, he stopped trying, and that's a big part of why he didn't win the game. But I will say he was set up perfectly to win the game. He was 1 vote away, and he should have gotten that extra vote if he just put an ounce of effort into his end game. At number 8, again, I have Coach. Very similar to Colby, where he just he plays the game perfectly, not perfectly, but he plays the game very well, and he set himself up in a perfect spot against someone who's going to get some votes, just like how Tina was going to get some votes, and he just did not close. The difference is Colby, while he didn't try, at least Coach tries. He does try his hardest, how he thinks the jury would want. But he just doesn't understand. The jury wants him to own up to his game, and whether it's because he doesn't want to or because he doesn't know that that's what the jury wants, he just simply doesn't do it. And that's really the knock on his game. He dominates the whole game completely from start to finish. It really is not even close. And honestly, I think he's the best player on this season. The issue is he just simply could not own his game at the end, and that's what the jury wanted from him. At number 7, I have someone who I think is extremely obscure, right? Like, no one thinks Chase Rice when they think top 7 runner-ups. But really looking at it, I mean, Chase is so close. He's 2 quitters voting for Fabio away from winning the game just to start off. On top of that, he plays the game very shabbily, but it's not like Fabio plays the game perfectly either. I think compared to his competition, he's like the second best player in this season, other than maybe like I'd say Brenda is a little bit better. Sash is a better strategical player, but Sash had no chance of winning and was a GOAT. So I think in the end, Chase is one of the better players in this season, plays a decent game, gets some blindsides going, has alliances within alliances. He has options. The issue is in the end, I guess he just wasn't the jury for him. I really feel like he didn't do anything ridiculously wrong. You know what I mean? I feel like there's nothing that he did where I'm like, whoa, Chase really lost the game there. It's just Fabio just happened to get the moment at the right time. He happened to seize the moment. At number 6, I have Christy. Similar to Gavin, she kind of navigates the game pretty well, not necessarily in the most control, but always surrounding power. And she gets screwed by a really ridiculous twist, as in Final Four fire making, just like how Gavin got screwed by Edge of Extinction. I think, honestly, though, the Final Four fire making is more egregious in this context, just because of the fact that she had no idea. Whereas in at least Gavin could prepare for 5 or 6 rounds beforehand from the merge to the end. So 8 rounds. I feel like she had no time to prepare and should have won this game. She probably wins over Devin, and I think overall that her game is very, very good. At number 5, I have Aubrey, someone who I think nowadays everyone hates on Aubrey just because of the whole Michelle versus Aubrey thing, and we've kind of gotten more developed Michelle content because of Winners at War. So now it's become the new quirky thing to hate Aubrey's game, which is flawed. Obviously, she should have gone out at the merge, but so should have Michelle, the winner of the season, which kind of cuts Aubrey some slack. I think Aubrey's game is good. It's very good. It's very impressive. It's not necessarily the best game ever for a runner-up, as we have 4 people who have, I think, clearly better games. For me, but before I did that, I made a tier ranking of this list. And for me, I had 2 people in A tier. I had Christy and Aubrey, and the next 4 were all in S tier. So there's very clear difference between Christy, Aubrey, everyone behind them, and then the 4 people ahead of them. And I think to me, Aubrey kind of rounds out this last, you're very good, but you're not a legend of the game for sure. At number 4, I have Parvati's game from HVV, a very impressive game that I think I would have voted for in real time. She loses against Russell and Cassandra, 2 people who, to me, she plays better games than. Maybe Russell plays a better game, but I think Russell's social gameplay in specifically this season is so horrendous that she should have taken it over him. Obviously, she missed something, and that was probably becoming too attached to Russell, because people saw Russell and her as more of an evil pair than Russell being evil and her kind of using Russell, which seems to have been the case. It's weird. I think Russell really does tank her game. I think she plays a great game. Obviously, the merge idle play, although it's become kind of overrated now, is still very, very impressive. Her game during the pre-merge is pretty decent. I think it's kind of lackluster, though. I think Russell does kind of carry her there. And then on top of that, after the merge hits, she really does play the game fantastically every single round. It's very, very impressive. At number 3, I have Russell's game from Samoa. I think, to me, this game is a perfect example of somebody playing the game very well, and the jury just simply does not want to let them win. Now, obviously, Russell makes a miscalculation here, taking Natalie to the end. I think he could beat Mick. I think he might have been able to beat Jason, although I think that's also probably a loss for him. I think, honestly, his best shot was bringing Shambo and also Mick and trying to beat them. At number 2, I have Dom. And the only reason why Dom isn't number 1 is because his game was threatened during the pre-merge. Someone did actively try and go for him in Chris Noble. Now, he won the battle, but it does show a fault in his social game that somebody did want to go after him. Whereas for the number 1 person in Boston Rob, I feel like, to me, Boston Rob, in All-Stars, there wasn't a time when anyone even held a candle to his game. He had complete social and strategical control over the game. It really wasn't even close. He maneuvers through the game, dragging his extra vote in Amber with him. And I think he does do it actively. It's not like he's in love and he's like, oh yeah, and we can also play the game. I think it's game first for him and love second. I can't really say the same about Amber. So to me, I think it's very impressive what he does. Dominic does it too. I just think in the end, it's the fact that Dom does get targeted at some point, whereas in Rob, it really just never happens. But what do you think? If you feel like it, give me your top 47 from these runner-ups that have played the game. If you don't feel like it, give me your top 5 or bottom 5 for that matter. I'm just curious what you guys think. Just so you guys know, I am planning on doing a merge boot ranking as well as a first boot ranking, and finally a final juror ranking at some point in the near future. Of course, none of this happens without you guys. Without you guys, I'm just a weird guy speaking a weird microphone. So as always, thank you. And if that's it, I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.